Did she or didn't she break the ministerial code?
Are you going to resign, Home Secretary?
Braverman fiercely defends her handling of a speeding notice while the Prime Minister consults his ethics advisor on the issue.
I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Also this lunchtime, a new search for Madeleine McCann at a reservoir 30 miles from where she disappeared. Labour pledges to get the NHS off its knees with new targets for heart disease and strokes. And
lift off, Falcon 9, go Axiom.
lift off as the first Arab woman heads for space.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Lucy Watson.
Good afternoon. In the last hour, the Home Secretary has said she regrets her speeding fine but claims nothing untoward happened, amid claims she broke the ministerial code over her handling of a driving offence. It's alleged Suella Braverman asked civil servants if she could have a private speed awareness course instead of attending a group session to avoid points and a fine. The union representing civil servants says it is a breach of the ministerial code. The Prime Minister has been consulting his independent ethics advisor on the matter as Labour calls for an investigation. Harry Horton now reports on the latest crisis encircling the Home Secretary.
Are you subject to different laws than the rest of us, Home Secretary?
Suella Braverman was driven to work this morning, but it's her response to her own driving offence last summer that's now under question. The Home Secretary was caught speeding last year and is alleged to have asked civil servants and her special advisor whether she could attend a private speeding awareness course. The ministerial code requires ministers not to ask civil servants for help with private matters. This morning, Suella Braverman insisted she'd done nothing wrong.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister arrived back from G7 meetings in Japan early this morning. Downing Street says Rishi Sunak has today met with his independent advisor and is availing himself with all the information. Labour has called for an investigation.
If it is found that Suella Braverman used her position to get a favourable outcome, then ultimately Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership here and needs to show her the door.
Suella Braverman resigned as Home Secretary last year after admitting breaching the ministerial code over email use. Days later, she was reappointed when Rishi Sunak took over as Prime Minister. It's now for him to decide whether these latest claims should cost her her job.
The key question for Rishi Sunak is whether or not she breached the ministerial code, yes, but whether or not actually her integrity is called into question and therefore he doesn't trust her, keeping her as his Home Secretary. So ultimately, it is going to be a political and a personal decision for Rishi Sunak.
The Home Secretary was in Downing Street this lunchtime.
You're going to resign, Home Secretary?
Stop the votes.
Her political future now lies in Rishi Sunak's hands. Harry Horton, ITV News.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor Anushka Astana is in Westminster with the latest on this. Anushka, some tough questions ahead for Suella Braverman in the Commons this afternoon.
Yeah, that's right. You heard at the end of Harry's piece that she's not keen to talk about this. When asked about this issue, she said, I want to stop the boats, but she is not going to be able to avoid more questions. In just an hour's time, we're going to have Home Office questions here in Parliament. Now, they are meant to be focused on policy, but from speaking to MPs and to the opposition, trust me, there's going to be plenty on this personal issue as well. Some opposition sources have seized on her language, saying she did nothing untoward, and they're going to ask her, what exactly did you say to the civil servants, and why is it that you feel you should be treated differently to other people who are caught for speeding. They say to me that they feel that this actually resonates more with voters than, for example, that previous scandal involving the use of personal emails. Now, in government, they tell me that she is not going to provide any more detail during that session, which means it could be quite awkward. Their feeling is that people will not feel this is the worst crime, that she asked if she was allowed to get advice from civil servants and she was told, no, you're not. And so she went ahead and obviously took the points. But clearly, in a week that there's lots of Home Office policy around, once again, the focus is on her personally.
Anushka in Westminster, thank you. Some breaking news this lunchtime, and ITV News understands that a new search is to begin in the hunt for Madeleine McCann. It is 16 years since she went missing from a resort in Praia da Luz in Portugal. Well, Neil Connery joins me now. Neil, this news has come in quite recently. What more can you tell us at this point?
Well, this new search is expected to begin tomorrow, as you say, at a dam near the town of Silves. It's about 50 kilometres or so from Praia da Luz, where, of course, Madeleine disappeared from in May 2007. Now, in June 2020, German prosecutors said they believe Christian Bruckner was the man responsible for Madeleine's kidnap and murder. His lawyers have always denied that. He remains in jail in connection with other offences. Now, the dam in question was searched twice in February and March 2008 by divers who'd been hired by a Portuguese lawyer. This new search will involve around 20 officers. It's expected to last 2 days and beyond if anything of relevance is found. There are some forensic tents already in place. Madeleine's parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, have continued to hope that she is still alive and will one day be reunited with them.
Neil, thank you for that update. The NHS will not survive another 5 years under the Tories. That was the bold statement by Sir Keir Starmer this morning as he laid out plans to improve the health service under his leadership. The Labour leader says his party will bring in new NHS targets to reduce deaths from heart disease and strokes by a quarter over 10 years and get suicide figures down within 5. Well, Shihab Khan listened to his speech and is now outside a hospital in Bishop Stortford for us. Shihab, promising is one thing, isn't it? But delivering is quite another.
Yeah, that's going to be the big challenge for Keir Starmer if he eventually ends up in Downing Street and is in charge of running the health service. But today was more about presenting a broad vision, Labour's vision, on how they will manage and what their aspirations are for the health service. He was speaking today in Essex, where he was very clear that a lot of this is about change and reform, as well as pumping more money into the health service. There were 3 broad ideas that we've picked out in particular. This idea of reducing deaths by 25% for those who suffer from heart disease and strokes. There's also the ambition to make sure there's a decline in the number of suicides within 5 years, but also meeting current targets, meeting those ambulance response times and improving cancer diagnosis. The big question is, how exactly will that happen? And there's a lot of talk about technology in particular, innovating the NHS, using technology to make sure that the NHS is more efficient, that they're able to capture issues before they currently do. But all these things cost money, which was something that I asked Sir Keir Starmer earlier today. You talk about all these reforms, you talk about new technology that you want to see introduced into the NHS, but all of that will cost money. Is there an estimate of how much exactly this is going to cost and how quickly can you implement it?
Technology, research, development, they will be the game changers of the future and reduce cost. If we go to a preventative model, it will make a huge difference.
Now, changing and reforming an organisation as big as the NHS is no easy task. One of the big challenges for Labour is going to be convincing a workforce, which we've seen on the picket lines, where morale is very low, to come along with them for these changes if they're ever in a position to do so. Sir Keir Starmer today was saying that he will be engaging with staff to make sure that is something that the Labour can do. It's an ambitious target. I suspect it will be something that the party talks about quite a lot heading into a general election, ensuring that the NHS in particular is one of the big campaigning points going into next year.
Shihab, thank you. With a cost of living crisis in full swing, the last thing anyone wants is to lose money to a financial scam. But there are some pretty convincing ones out there that many people have been falling for. Today, the consumer group Which released a warning detailing the most common ones. Well, Charlie Frost has been looking through them and joins me now. Charlie, what should we be looking out for?
Well, as we know, scams are constantly evolving, but according to which, these are 4 of the most convincing to look out for at the moment. Now, the first is almost as horrible as it sounds. It's called pig butchering. Now, this is where fraudsters meet people on online dating sites, convince them they want a romantic relationship, in a sense, fattening their victim up before the execution, which is convincing them to give them cash to invest in property or cryptocurrency, which in the end turns out to be fake. Now, the second is made up missing person appeals. Fraudsters create fake appeals, which people share widely on social media. The posts are then edited to become adverts for investment scams. Now, thirdly is fake money requests from genuine PayPal email addresses. Now, these are sent out by scammers for high-value items or posing as HMRC to demand overdue tax payments. And finally, apps that we download, which might turn out to be dodgy and contain malware, which steals our data, allowing scammers to take and use our information. Now, all of this is quite alarming. This is one piece of advice from which.
Don't get rushed. Don't feel like you're being bounced into making a decision. It's always okay for you to take a second, have a think. If anything seems unusual, have a chat with a friend or family member, because they might be able to bring a bit of perspective to it for you.
So as these scams continue to get more sophisticated, the advice is just to take your time over any online transactions.
Charlie, thank you for that insight. It is 6 years since 22 people were murdered at Manchester Arena in one of the worst terror attacks on UK soil. New research out today shows a shocking lack of support for survivors seeking help from the trauma, as Sally Biddulph explains.
Terror on the streets of Manchester. A suicide bomber targeted an Ariana Grande concert at the arena 6 years ago tonight. 22 people were killed, thousands more were injured and left traumatised. Wounds may have healed, but psychological and emotional recovery, especially for the youngest survivors, has largely depended on access to support, and it is not universal.
Those that did get help are doing better, and they're really engaging in schools. Some of them have gone off to university, etc. But those that didn't get help are still finding themselves struggling and desperately trying to find it. And I feel that they shouldn't have to find it. We want that help to come out to them. And although it did by some agencies, there wasn't the capacity to do that well enough.
Today's report from Be the Difference found that 93% of young survivors felt they needed support in the aftermath of the attack. But of those who needed it, 29% have never received it, with 4 in 10 of that 29% saying it was never even offered. A perfect storm of funding cuts, a lack of trained counsellors, and the sheer backlog from increased demand meant many missed out. Findings from this report will feed into the government's Survivors' Charter, a blueprint to help those affected by terrorist attacks. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Still to come this lunchtime, the space flight with a difference. We'll explain why. And reaching a record peak, how this double amputee conquered Everest. Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary have presented the first This Morning show since Phillip Schofield quit the programme at the weekend. The interim presenters stepped in following Schofield's departure from the ITV show after more than 20 years in the job, while our entertainment reporter Rishi Davda was watching it this morning. Rishi, what did you make of what was said?
Well, This Morning managed to condense 20 years of Phillip Schofield into about just 30 seconds. Phillip presented his final show last week, and I think had he known it was going to be the last time, we would have had a big drawn-out goodbye. But there was something very clinical about the way that Alison and Dermot paid tribute. Let's have a listen.
Now, we can't start today's show without paying tribute to the man who spent the last 2 decades sitting on the This Morning sofa, Phillip Schofield.
So, as a show, everyone on and off-screen at ITV and This Morning want to say a huge thank you to Phil for what he's done to make the show such a success over the last 21 years.
Quite simply, we all know he's one of the best live television broadcasters this country has ever had. And we and all the team wish him all the best for the future.
Yeah.
Well, Phillip first presented this morning back in 2002, but over the weekend announced he was stepping down with immediate effect. In a statement, he said that ITV has decided the current situation can't go on. Well, the current situation that he appeared to be referring to was the rumoured breakdown in the relationship between Phillip and co-presenter Holly Willoughby, who thanked him for his knowledge, his experience and his humour. They'd been presenting together since 2009. Well, what happens to the pair of them now? Well, Holly's off for a couple of weeks, then she'll be back on this morning, and I'm sure plenty of people will be tuning in to see what she has to say. As for Phillip, well, he'll host the British Soap Awards on the 3rd of June and has also been promised a brand new peak time series by ITV. Exactly what that is or when it will air, we don't know yet.
Rishi, thank you very much, as always. Greece's centre-right Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has won the country's national election, but has fallen short of an overall majority. With more than 99% of the votes in, Mitsotakis' New Democracy Party are set to finish 5 seats short overall. It's expected current President Katerina Sakel-Aropoulou is due to hand Mitsotakis the mandate to try to form a coalition government. There are calls for every work-related suicide to be investigated by the Health and Safety Executive. 2 academics made the recommendations in the British Medical Journal in the wake of head teacher Ruth Perry's death. She took her own life in January following a negative Ofsted inspection. And the budget airline Ryanair says it's made an annual profit of £1.24 billion after a bounce back in travel demand and higher fares. This year's profits compare with a net loss of £309 million the previous year. SpaceX has launched the first Arab woman into space. 4 people set off on a 10-day mission to the International Space Station overnight. Among them is Rayana Bainawi. She is a breast cancer researcher, and her place on board was paid for by the Saudi government. Barbara Holmes has the story.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power. And liftoff, Falcon 9, go Axiom.
With tickets an estimated $55 million each, this is an expensive excursion. But the 4 people on this chartered flight are heading on a trip that can really live up to the promise of being out of this world. On board this SpaceX flight are a crew led by retired NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, who now works for Axiom, the company who arranged this trip. The 3 ticket holders include a US businessman and 2 Saudis, including stem cell researcher Rayana Bainawi, the first woman from the kingdom to go to space.
To the people around the world, well, the future is very bright, and I would like you to dream big, believe in yourselves, and believe in humanity.
They were both sponsored by the Saudi Arabian government, an institution that only 5 years ago still banned women from driving. The crew will spend just over a week at the International Space Station, where they will conduct experiments, photograph the Earth and chat with school children back home. It'll end with a splashdown off the Florida coast. This is the latest in the accelerating move towards private space travel. Axiom have plans to build their own rooms on the ISS before eventually removing them to form a standalone outpost available for hire. But it's not all plain sailing in the private space sector. Last month, SpaceX uncrewed new rocket Starship exploded on its maiden flight. But that did not put off this crew, and their personal journeys over the next few days are a sign of the direction in which space travel is heading. Barbara Holmes, ITV News.
Now, staying in the skies, and footage has captured the breathtaking moment a meteor fell to Earth and lit up the sky before crashing into the ground. The meteorite briefly set alight the Queensland sky over Cairns this weekend. The fireball grew larger as it plummeted, though it is not thought it was big enough to leave a crater and may have broken up before it hit the ground. Finally, this lunchtime, the bravery of the Gurkhas is well known, but even by their standards, Harry Buddha Maga is a league above. He lost both his legs in 2010 when he stepped on an IED in Afghanistan. He thought then that his life was over, but after 4 years of planning, he's just realised a lifelong dream to climb Everest, and in the process become the first double amputee to do so. Sangeeta Kandola has his story.
It is amazing, but also it's kind of unreal. I used to, sit here. I was thinking, how am I gonna do it? And now it's done. I can't believe it. Oh yeah.
Making your way up Mount Everest is a momentous task for anyone, but for Harry Buddha Maga, it has been harder than you can imagine. Now he has made history as the first double above-the-knee amputee ever to climb Everest.
Yeah, I was thinking lots of things. It's just trying to focus one step at a time, but make sure teams are okay. We're all good. All our oxygen is enough to come down.
Hot water. It's amazing.
Harry, a former corporal in the Gurkha regiment, lost both his legs from an IED in Afghanistan in 2010. With the help of his prosthetic legs, he undertook the punishing, grueling expedition to Everest, which saw him face extreme temperatures.
With the weather wasn't that favorable, but we were able to summit. Just thinking of the last 5 years. 5 years of hard work. Hello guys, you okay?
It wasn't just the last 5 years of training that was hard work for Harry. There was a legal challenge before the climbing one, as Harry fought to overturn a Nepalese law banning disabled people from attempting to reach the peak. And the overriding part of his climb has been to change perceptions on disability.
Keep continuously making awareness of disability and changing the perception on persons with a disability.
Harry hopes his history-making Everest expedition will inspire others to challenge themselves. Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
Wow, that is all from us. Bye-bye for now.